This episode is brought to you by Netflix. The MLB at Field of Dreams returns. Bryce Harper and the Philadelphia Phillies face Byron Buxton and the Minnesota Twins at the iconic Field of Dreams ballpark. The field is calling. Watch the MLB at Field of Dreams game live on Netflix Thursday, August 13th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific.
Amazon Health AI presents Painful Thoughts.
I can't stop scratching my downtown. Yeah, but I'm not itching to go downtown and tell a receptionist I'm here to talk about my downtown. Some things you'd rather type than say out loud.
There's no question too embarrassing for Amazon Health AI. Chat your symptoms and get virtual care 24/7. Healthcare just got less painful.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey, who was football practice rained out? What happened?
Yeah, it was rained out, Jim. It's been first week of football practice for us. We got a young boy who is not yet putting on the pads, but he's running around with helmets. I think next week there'll be some pads, but it was raining a little too hard today, so we can't say anyone was upset about this. I'll tell you that right now.
Okay. Though, speaking of people who were upset, did have someone who's in management at the Gershwin Theater reach out and wanted me to correct what I had said at the start of last week's Epic Universal Podcast. I was mentioning that, Wicked is coming up on its 9,000th performance. And it turns out I'm an English major. The person who shared this information with me was a theater major. And long story short, none of us are good at math. It turns out not going to have the 9,000th performance this fall. Actually, early next year, because it takes a while to actually get to 9,000 performances. So I apologize, but Universal, their theatrical division, will definitely be thumping the tub in regard to when this happens. And again, at that point, Wicked becomes one of only 4 musicals in the history of Broadway to make it to this many performances. And, that's an elite group: Phantom, Lion King, and the Revival of Chicago.
Yeah, and because we made that error, we got to talk about it again today. So that gives us 900 shows in a row that we've talked about now. So that all works out really well. So that gives us a little bit of time too, Jim, because at the end of the day, it was one of those things where that'd be nice to go see. But I'm like, we've been traveling so much at the beginning of the year. That's a whole new year, whole new slate that we can travel to. So
there we go.
So that sounds good for me. Actually, I was kind of relieved a bit.
Yeah. And having spent yesterday driving down to New York City and then coming right back, it's like, I'm good if we can wait 6 months before I have to do that again.
Right. Plus, that gives us time to talk to our sponsor, right? So they can help us book it.
There we go. And speaking of our sponsor, which this week is Be Our Guest Vacation. And if you are planning your next Universal Orlando resort adventure, well, let the experts at Be Our Guest Vacation take care of the details. Their travel professionals provide personalized concierge service and will work one-on-one with you to plan your resort stay, help with the theme park tickets, and special extras from the Wizarding World of Harry Potter to Jurassic Park to Epic Universe. They can help create the ideal Universal vacation. So get started today at beourguestvacations.com and be sure to mention that it was the Epic Universal Podcast that sent you. So, all right, we now move to the news portion of this week's show, which, I have to ask, how many people out there are actually familiar with the sci-fi horror comedy from 1988, Killer Klowns from Outer Space? Show of hands here, please.
Yeah, Jim, I think those that aren't familiar, at least in the Hollywood realm, thought that this was a very, very poorly kept secret. But Universal did just announce that the Killer Klowns are getting their own house out in Hollywood. But I guess there's been props and lots of things backstage footage kind of alluding to this for quite some time. So some people were like, yeah, I thought they already announced this. And truth be told, now remember, the killer clowns are going to be down here in Florida in like a scare zone. There's like a clown area. But yeah, the killer clowns from outer space will have their own little house. And now this is kind of I don't think it's going to be a clone or a resurrected version, but they've done this before.
They have.
And I actually was checking it out online. It's a very kooky little house with clowns. Now, Jim, you're not a fan of clowns, is that right?
I am not, but I have to say I saw this when they did it as a scare zone at Universal Orlando back in 2018. And they did such a ridiculously good job of aping the look and the style of the film. I mean, again, I couldn't help but linger in the area and just watch, the clowns, subtly menacing folks. They did such a great job. So I'm actually kind of cool with this idea. And if, we were out in Hollywood to catch this in person, I would make a trip. I would definitely make a trip. So
I'll tell you what, I did just catch the trailer because I knew of this movie. I've not watched it, but I was like, I'm going to catch the trailer. And they are some wonky looking clowns. I'll tell you, like they're almost ridiculously over the top funny, where I think maybe you're just normal, your normal circus clown is a bit scarier to me than these guys where they're just a bit like, they're like monster makeup to an extent. But I found it interesting and entertaining, and I would also check it out.
There we go.
Those in Hollywood get to go through the house, and hopefully I'll get to watch it online.
Now, speaking though of mazes that are based on film, we also have word of a Purge themed maze. I guess this is returning to Hollywood. Is that correct?
Oh, well, Jim, it's not so much a maze. This is taking over the WaterWorld set. So this is the Purge Dangerous Waters is returning. So this is a stunt show.
Okay.
And so this is returning. I think it might have been last year, maybe the year before. Either way, I got to watch a little bit online as well because, I'm not necessarily a giant horror fan, so I didn't know of the Purge and I didn't know that there was a water show and all this stuff like that. But they do it at nighttime and they take over the WaterWorld set and they have a whole big, cinematic area there with this Purge. So are you familiar with the Purge franchise? Because I kind of had to look this up.
I am, the whole idea that, for, from sunrise or sundown to sunset, you can kill whoever you want. And, it makes me happy that I live out in the woods. In my case, it's a couple of belligerent squirrels, all right? And they can be bought off with birdseed. But yeah.
Yeah, that's the deal, I guess, is, hey, this movie franchise that what I think debuted in 2023, is dystopian setting of the Purge film franchise. So that's kind of this show. So it's interesting to see. I like what they've been doing with the WaterWorld. They did it. They did One Piece during the Fan Fest, they're utilizing that space and theming it up. It's nice to see that they can get multiple uses out of that.
And speaking though of the WaterWorld stage, the arena there at Universal Studios Hollywood, Greg Dolph. He's played the Deacon in the WaterWorld show there for 30 years, is that right?
He just got a standing ovation. He just did his final performance on July 31st. So I watched a lot of the clips there and saw a lot of love coming out for the Deacon. And for the most part, they were chanting, away, and it was his last show. So that is a long time to play one character in the WaterWorld. And I was going to say, if you had a chance to talk to him, interview him, or even see the show, but I think you just saw the show this year for the first time, right? With us.
I did. And in fact, what impressed me the most about the WaterWorld show, in fact, I want to say it may have been Greg who did this, but as they finished the performance and they're introducing the various stunt performers who took part in this, the gentleman who played the Deacon identified each of the key players and then talked about the various shows or films that they had previously worked on. I mean, sort of stressing that, no, this isn't just a theme park show. These people, you've seen these in movies. You've seen them in TV shows. These are pros doing this in front of you. And, kudos to Greg for having hung in there 30 years playing the Deacon, because that that looked like it was a tough role. He spent a lot of time, rode it on the boat, had to climb all over the set. I want to say he eventually falls off to his death. Spoiler alert.
Sorry, guys.
But no, I hope whatever he's doing next in his career, is equally challenging.
And they have more land too. They're not so infatuated by dirt. Hopefully where he's at, he's not so much water. But
all right,
congrats to him, and we'll be excited when I go out there again to see who kind of replaces him, who carries on for 30 more years with WaterWorld. Mm-hmm. By that point in time, it might be a lot cheaper for props.
Yeah, and the weird part is, WaterWorld is super popular at the Universal Park that's in Osaka. I want to say the concept art for the UK suggests it's going to show up there as well, though that's under construction. And speaking of construction, though, we have news of some work that's going on. The entrance archway at Universal Studios Florida, is that right?
Yeah, Jim, when we were down there last month or earlier this month or whenever it was, they started blocking off some of it, and it turns to me that they're painting it. Right now, the archway is like a tan, right? Like a tan and greenish or so forth. Now, but they're going to paint it white. And I just I'm just thinking to myself, white is I have some white walls and stuff, and those are always the one that's hardest to clean and keep clean and all that like that. Mm-hmm. So do you have any idea why they're painting, going back to white? I know they've been painting some of the other buildings, so it's all going to match. Mm-hmm. Was that the original color of the arch, or?
Boy, okay. And remember, I'm thinking back to the original arch. In fact, we'll be talking later today about, the early days of Universal Studios Florida. And I want to say it might have been white back then. I'll have to check some pictures, but
but is this for sun damage, or they just want to change it up? There's no real reason. It's always kind of baffles me. If it looks clean and it doesn't look beat up, why are we changing all these colors? We've seen that happen at theme parks over the years. They just randomly change it up.
Could this be a primer situation? Put the white down and then you paint it the color you really want to paint it?
It seems like a lot of work, Jim. I don't know what they're doing here. So either way, get your pictures now with the tan if you can. But you have some, walls up underneath it. I guess you still can pass through it. So I guess your picture perfect. You're going to have to use your fancy photo app to crop out some of that stuff. But.
Okay. And speaking of pictures, when people go on cruises, man, they take a lot of photographs. But we've now got somebody a consultant who's trying to suggest that there's a business that Universal might want to consider moving into?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I saw it floating by on Twitter, so I figured why not throw it out there to you. So there's a gentleman named Michael Wolf, who's an Activate consultant. He's the CEO, and he's not associated with Universal by any means, but some of the press picked it up as this means Universal's getting into the cruise. So this is us basically saying, no, Universal did not say they should get into the cruise industry. A gentleman who is a consultant that works on things like this and has previously served as a president and chief operating officer of MTV and a couple others was on basically quoting that says Universal should get into the cruise business. And I know this floats up over and over. So I just kind of wanted your take on if you've ever heard any rumblings, have they ever got close? I mean, it's a natural step, and Wolf even describes this. It's the natural step for Universal's theme park franchises. Basically, it's, we saw Disney do it to high, praise and a lot to profit, I'm sure. So it seems like Universal could do that. But have we ever seen a time where it's been close, or are we way off, or what do you know, Jim?
Well, I mean, I know that Universal has eyeballed this. The hard reality, though, is if you think about it, you've got Universal Kids, the park in Frisco, Texas, which is supposed to be, Universal stepping into the regional theme park market. And that coupled with the fact that, you have the park we were just talking about, the Universal United Kingdom under construction. We've got Epic Universe, which is still, still in the process of getting, its feet under it. It's one of those things where Universal already has a lot of plates spinning. So the whole notion of, and you should also get into cruising, at this point. I mean, I don't necessarily think that this might not be something that explore in the future, but not the immediate future.
Yeah. Well, once I believe I heard you say it before, right? Though, like when you do a cruise ship, you like start in one economy and then it bleeds over to another. So it's just a weird time to even do that. Like, so you'd have to be really confident, really ready to go. And I think that yes, it makes obvious sense that would be something they could do, but they seem like they're staying on land right now.
Well, and remember when Disney first got into this business, it partnered with the Big Red Boat. I mean, it's entirely possible that a Universal, forgive me for using this euphemism, might want to try the waters first by, can we borrow your boat? Do you want Poe? Do you want Shrek? Do you want, our characters to wander around your boat and interact with folks and just sort of try the business on, see if it works for them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if you start seeing characters showing up on a Royal Caribbean or another cruise line, that would be the key that they're getting close, maybe.
And speaking of Universal having interesting business partners, when we get back from this break, we're going to talk about the history of Universal and the Hard Rock Cafe Company. But before we do that, there's this. This episode is brought to you by Weight Loss by Hims. So do you have a weight loss goal, a number that you'd really like to reach in the not-so-distant future? If so, then you really need to check out Weight Loss by Hims, because they've got a program that's designed to support you every step of the way. By that I mean, Hims offers access to an affordable range of FDA-approved GLP-1 medications, including the Wegovy pill and the Wegovy pen. Hims also can connect you with a licensed provider who's 100% online. More importantly, with a care team that'll support you in losing weight and keeping it off. Best of all, if prescribed, your medication is delivered right to your door. No insurance necessary. In short, Hims makes it simple to find GLP-1 care that fits you and your wallet, with a personalized treatment plan and unlimited dosage changes as needed. So are you ready to reach your goals? Visit hims.com/Epic Universal to get a personalized, affordable plan that gets you. That's HIMS.com/Epic Universal, all one word, hims.com/Epic Universal. Weight Loss by Hims is not available in all 50 states. Wegovy is the registered trademark of Novo Nordisk AS. To get started and learn more, including important safety information, Wegovy clinical study information, and restrictions, visit hims.com. We thank them for sponsoring today's show.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
At ZocDoc, we know being a healthy adult is like living in a video game. Every day has side quests, taxes, laundry, birthdays, and just when you're leveling up, you have to book a doctor. The insurance portal crashes, they put you on hold, your doctor doesn't take your plan, game over. We see you, so we made booking a doctor easy. Download ZocDoc, search by specialty, insurance, and availability. Book instantly, no cheat codes required. Find a doctor you love with ZocDoc.
And we're back, folks. Before we get started here on this week's feature, kind of a sad note. And this has to do with a Hard Rock Cafe that's located in Florida. Now, mind you, not any of the ones on Universal property. I'm talking about the Hard Rock that's in Miami at the Bayside Marketplace. Eric, that's been up and running since September of 1993, but it's closing permanently later this month on August 19th, to be exact. So basically 2 weeks and change from when this episode of Epic Universe Podcast posts. And now what's interesting about the Hard Rock in Miami is it's actually the second ever, Eric, in the entire state of Florida, whereas the first one, well, that was partially located in the parking lot of Universal Studios Florida, and then partially inside of the theme park itself. And did I also mention that this three-story tall structure was shaped like an electric guitar, and it had seating for 450 people at a time inside?
So that opened before 93. So the park opened, in 90, 91, right? Or something like that?
Well, actually, the park opened in June of 1990. But what was kind of interesting about the Hard Rock Cafe for Orlando is it actually opened in April of 1990. So that's 2 months before the theme park could throw open its doors. And kind of an interesting story. Folks at Disney heard about this. And, they were managers at Walt Disney World who then made a habit of driving over to Universal, because, again, you could drive straight into the parking lot, roll right up to the Hard Rock Cafe, and have lunch, and they would tip the staff to, could we have a seat by a window? Mm-hmm. And more to the point, could you leave the back door open? Because we kind of like to walk out in the balcony. And so, this was how Disney kept tabs on what was going on with Universal.
A bunch of Disney executives are big rock and roll fans in 1990.
There we go. All right. So, how did Hard Rock wind up being such a big part of the Universal Orlando Resort? And, because, again, think about it. Today, we have the supersized version of the restaurant. By the way, that restaurant also features the Coliseum of Rock, which is a 3,000-seat concert venue. And now, mind you, that Eric, that didn't open until December of 1998, and the concert venue, well, that didn't open till March 12th, 1999, my 40th birthday, by the way.
What do you know?
And Sir Elton John headlined the opening night concert at that venue.
And he wished you a happy birthday. I remember him saying that.
I very unlikely. Now, Hard Rock Hotel at the Universal Orlando Resort, that 650-room hotel doesn't open until nearly 2 years later, January of 2001. But again, how does Hard Rock wind up becoming this big a part of Universal Orlando? To tell that story, we got to jump back 55 years to June of 1971. This is when two American expats, Isaac Tigert and Peter Morton, are living in London, and they're desperate for a decent cheeseburger. And here's the thing. It was hard. It's, what is it? It's ground beef. It's a slice of cheese. It's bread. How hard could that be? Well, in the UK, it's a lot harder than you might think. Jay Leno, as part of his stand-up act, used to do this great bit about how when you're over in the United Kingdom, and what do they serve you to eat? It's a blood pudding, steak and kidney pie, where if you make the mistake of going out behind the restaurant and looking into the dumpster, you look in there, that's where the prime rib is. That's where the filet mignon is. Whereas if you go inside and you look at the menu, what are they serving their patrons? Sheep intestines, face of leprechaun. Maybe that's not really what goes on. But Isaac and Peter certainly felt like that. So in order to guarantee that they'd finally be a place in the UK where an American could get a decent cheeseburger, they lease an old Rolls-Royce dealership and then turn it into a restaurant, which they call the Hard Rock Cafe. And what I love about this story, Eric, is that the owner of the old Rolls-Royce place hears about their plan and goes, "Oh, God, that's a terrible idea. I'll only give you a 6-month lease on the place, because you're going to be out of business in weeks. And obviously, that was wrong. It does so well that, Morton is like, I want to take this idea back to the States. And Tiger, on the other hand, was like, I want to explore what we can maybe do with this internationally. So they literally go to their separate corners of the globe. Now, first stateside Hard Rock Cafe, that opens in L.A. at the Beverly Center in October of 1982. And by the way, very hard to miss this restaurant. It had a full-size 1957 Cadillac sticking out of its roof. But that's not why the restaurant became famous. It became famous because of the ridiculously long lines to get in. The hours-long wait. People, just they wanted to get in. They wanted to see the memorabilia. They wanted to find out, this cool thing from London has come to L.A. And Morton leverages the success of the Southern California Hard Rock Cafe to now get other locations going in other major American cities. So the New York City Hard Rock Cafe, by the way, first one was on 57th Street. Right now, there's the one in Times Square. But that opens in March of 1984. San Francisco edition of Hard Rock gets opened 6 months later, September of 84. Chicago gets its Hard Rock June of 86. Dallas gets a Hard Rock of its own November that same year. That's also 86. And I want to say at this point, Eric, that there are 10 restaurants in the chain. And I still remember when Boston's Hard Rock Cafe opened on Stewart Street. This was just up the way from Copley Place. And I remember standing outside in an hours-long line in June of 89 thinking, there is no way a cheeseburger can be good enough to justify this kind of wait. And I was wrong. It was a very good cheeseburger. Now, what really changed the Hard Rock Cafe had happened the year previous, 1988. This is when the chain's co-founder, Isaac Tigert, he sells his shares in Hard Rock Cafe International to restaurateur and entrepreneur Robert Earl. Okay, so Disney fan, you know Robert Earl. You know him from Earl of Sandwich.
I was going to say, who else is known as an Earl and has a sandwich like a...
There we go.
Perfect.
But what's interesting is Robert came from the UK. In fact, he had much success in the early 70s with a series of beef eater-themed restaurants. And he sells those off, takes his money, comes stateside, and he arrives in Orlando in the late 70s, early 80s, and he proceeds to set up a number of themed restaurants on I Drive. So this is where we get King Henry's Feast and Caruso's Palace, and these are just as successful. And so Robert takes the money he's made in Central Florida and uses that to buy out Tigert shares in Hard Rock. But almost as soon as he's done that, he's like, I want to bring this idea to Orlando. So he now gets in touch with the folks who are building Universal Studios Florida, which, by the way, has only broken ground. There's a 108-acre theme park, only broke ground November of 1988. And, so Robert turns to the guys at MCA and say, hey, how would you like your own Hard Rock Cafe? And the MCA executives, knowing about the hours-long lines in New York and Chicago and San Francisco and L.A., are like, yes, please. So this project gets announced March of 1989. It's a $5 million facility. By the way, the first Hard Rock built from the ground up. Previously, they'd always gone into the pre-existing buildings like that Rolls-Royce dealership. And this one, again, Robert wanted a building that made a statement. So as we mentioned earlier, building that, it's shaped like an electric guitar. In fact, what was especially interesting about this is that Robert, Universal went to him and said, all right, well, here's the deal. We can put the Hard Rock Cafe inside the theme park, or we can put it out in the parking lot, so people can just drive up. What do you want? And he said, both. So again, they built it so it straddled, sort of the berm. So, and it had a dual entrance. So if you came in from the parking lot, in fact, what was kind of cool is you walked along the 300-foot long neck of the electric guitar to get to the 3-story tall building. And by the way, this was the biggest Hard Rock Cafe that had been built up until that time. And on the other hand, if you're inside the theme park and you decide that, you want to go in and get a cheeseburger, there was a set of steps back there, but you had to get your hand stamped so you could get back in the park. But anyway, work begins on the Hard Rock Cafe. And again, what a stress here. After work has begun on the Really For Real theme park. So, you're hearing that and saying, oh, well, okay, I guess it's not going to open with the park. And that's true because it beat the park. And what was stunning about this is that Robert had all of this elaborate stuff that he did. I mean, for example, there were 2-story tall stained glass windows in the restaurant, one of Chuck Berry, one of Jerry Lee Lewis, and one of Elvis. The gift shop, Eric, the back wall behind the cash wrap was actually made out of bricks that had been taken out of the club in Frankfurt, where the Beatles had perfected their craft before they broke through. The whole place was like this. And as I mentioned, for whatever reason, is able to open in April of 1990, and Orlando locals start, showing up, and including those Disney executives who, just sort of, and again, and this is the thing, Universal knows about this. And it's like, and they'd see the guys out on the balcony with, with one of those throwaway camera things going click, 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 which is how Disney knew that, they're in trouble. They're going to have a bad first summer. And that's actually what happened, Eric. Universal Studios Florida opens June 7th, 1990, and you can go online right now and see opening, news reports from the opening day with very angry people shouting into the ticket booths to the effect of, I want my money back. Though it's worth noting, nobody ever sent a cheeseburger back at the Hard Rock Cafe. But we'll get to how it went from just a restaurant to a hotel and a concert venue in a sec. But before we do that, there's this.
This episode is brought to you by Workday. Guessing is for game shows, not your business, especially when your margin for error is 0. Workday is the enterprise AI platform for HR, finance, and IT, with a deep understanding of your organization's context and guardrails. So every AI action is permission aware, giving you accuracy 24/7 and the ability to not just get work done, but get it done right. It's a new Workday.
And we're back. Quick question, Eric. Have you, during now how many trips to Universal are we now up to in Florida?
Oh, geez. Well, we did kind of lose track. It's probably 5 or 6, I'm sure. We've gone a lot over the last couple of years,
okay.
Jim. We're annual pass holders for the second year in a row now.
There we go. Have you made it into the Hard Rock Cafe there at City Walk in Florida? Or
several times, Jim. I bought myself a couple of Orlando shirts. I am a giant fan of the Hard Rocks. I have frequented as many as I can when we go to cities, and I'm still kicking myself because I forgot to go. We were right there in Philadelphia. We were right. That's where we ate right next to it. I was going to go get myself a shirt. We hopped on a double-decker bus, and then I see the spinning guitar, and I'm like, oh, no, we missed it. So we'll have to do it next year. But no, I love myself a Hard Rock, so we've been there a couple times.
There we go. All right. Well, again, as picking up where we left off with the feature, again, Universal Studios Florida had a tough first year in 1990. Now, it's worth noting, Hard Rock Cafe was not part of those problems. They were a reliable partner. They never gave the park any problems at all. And in fact, MTA executives were so pleased with the Florida operation, we're talking about the Hard Rock Cafe, that when they went to build the original City Walk out in Hollywood in the mid-1990s, Hard Rock Cafe was one of the very first companies they reached out to be part of that project. And, of course, Robert Earl said, well, yes. And the Hard Rock Cafe at Universal Hollywood City Walk that opens in January of 1996 with a grand opening concert that was headlined by Sammy Hagar. Is that when he would have been with Van Halen by that point, 96?
Maybe. I mean, it was definitely around that time frame, so maybe.
Okay. I remember David
I think it's a good Len question. Isn't Len a big Van Halen guy? He would know.
All right.
I know Journey, and I know Beatles.
Okay, I will check with Mr. Testa and get back to you. Okay, so anyway, Universal City Walk is a big enough hit out in Hollywood that Universal Creative decides that, well, we got to bring the same idea to Orlando. Though kind of interesting, early on, the Florida version of City Walk had a different name. It was going to be called E-Zone, as in Entertainment Zone. And eventually there were executives at MCA. It's like, why exactly are we reinventing the wheel here? We already have a great name, City Walk. Let's stick with that. Now, mind you, same point, or at this point in our story, Robert Earl, who during his tenure at Hard Rock Cafe has grown the chain from 7 restaurants to 22. Well, he sells off his stake in Hard Rock to the Rank organization. And, Eric, this happens in 1991. And now, what makes this difficult is Robert turns around, with his big pile of selling Hard Rock money, and launches the Planet Hollywood chain, which is basically the Hard Rock Cafe, only instead of celebrating music, they celebrate movies.
Yeah.
And by the way, when they do the first one, he starts by building a 3-story tall building in Florida. Why does that sound familiar for some reason? And this is right next to the parking lot for Pleasure Island, right across from the AMC Theater at Disney World. And it opens December 18th, 1994, just 3 years after he exits Hard Rock. And by the way, I was there for the opening night. And I can tell you flat out, Eric, that this was not a repeat of the Hard Rock Cafe in Florida. They weren't ready 2 months in advance. A half hour before the celebrities came down the red carpet, they were literally laying down the tile in the lobby, So
it didn't make Schwarzenegger happy, wasn't he? And with Bruce Willis, and they had a real star-studded cast didn't they?
They did. Sylvester Stallone as well. But anyway. Yeah. Back to Hard Rock and Planet Hollywood. That situation gets really ugly very fast, Eric. Hard Rock Cafe actually takes Earl to court, accuses him of stealing the Hard Rock Cafe business plan and using it as the roadmap for Planet Hollywood. I mean, they come at him to the effect of, you copied the menu. You couldn't even get a new menu. Now, back to Universal. Hard Rock Cafe has become such a big part of the success of Universal Studios Florida that when the company decides it's bringing Universal City Walk to Orlando, they turn to Hard Rock's new management team and ask, well, do you want to be part of this project or stick with what you got? And the Hard Rock Cafe officials look at Universal's plan to turn their single theme park in Central Florida into a destination resort. And they come back and say, okay, we want in, but here are our conditions. And it's like, we want to build a brand new restaurant. And by the way, this Hard Rock Cafe will be more than double the size of the eatery we previously had. So we're going from 450 people being fed at a time to 1,000. They also want to build an actual performance venue. We mentioned this earlier in today's show, with seating for 3,000 people. This is the Colosseum of Rock, and it has that name because the exterior of this thing looks just like the Colosseum in Rome. And the kicker is that they want to build this brand new restaurant performance venue in such a way that it's equidistant between the original Universal Studios Florida and the new theme park that Universal Creative is building in Orlando, Universal's Islands of Adventure. And by the way, given that Hard Rock had just opened their very first hotel and casino in Las Vegas. That came online in March of 1995. And by the way, when Eric and Lauren and I were down in Vegas, this past March, we were walking up the Strip kind of marveling at the brand new Hard Rock Hotel that's being built.
Yeah, they tear down. I think it was the Mirage they tore down to build that.
They did.
It was half guitar already. It's coming up.
Yeah, looked amazing. But anyway, again, they had just gotten into the hotel business, and so Hard Rock, in addition to the supersized and relocated restaurant and performance venue, they said, we also want to talk with you guys about maybe building a Hard Rock themed hotel right here in Orlando. So it's a crazy ambitious plan. The only downside is that this means that Orlando's original Hard Rock Cafe, again, the one that straddles the wall between Universal Studios Florida's parking lot and the theme park, it's going to have to close. And that's what happens in December of 1998. Though, what's kind of interesting is, just like with the original Universal Studios Florida theme park, construction of the Orlando version of Universal City Walk, it falls behind schedule, with most of the restaurants and the stores and the clubs not ready to open until early 99. Not the newly expanded Hard Rock Cafe restaurant and performance venue that's ready to go in late 1998. They are just good at what they do. Now, if we double back to the original restaurant, that closes. And Eric, that sits empty for more than a decade. In fact, the restaurant backed up against where the Woody Woodpecker Kids Zone got built. That opened, a year later in 2000, and that's where today we find the DreamWorks land. And the building then stayed basically intact, locked up tight, till 2011.
Oh, so it was way back there. Like, I was envisioning it was kind of in the same spot, like before, where City Walk would be. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's actually far back in there. So it was on a whole different side.
It was. And what was interesting is that the Halloween Horror Night team kept coming to park management. It's like, please, please, please let us stage a music-themed horror maze in that building.
Oh, yeah.
And meanwhile, entertainment is coming to park managers. Look, we have this idea for a Sunset Boulevard-like dining experience where, guests actually get to go into this spooky old Hollywood mansion and then have a meal with a Norman Desmond-like, silent film star and her creepy old butler. But for insurance reasons, the folks at Universal are like, nope, we're not doing that. And again, it stands there basically empty till 2011. And the irony here is it only gets pulled down, Eric, because, again, remember, this thing is straddling the back wall of, the theme park. And starting in 2011, this is when the Universal Superstar Parade is being built. And the people who run the parade are like, from the parade barn to the park, we got to go along that perimeter road. And these floats are the biggest ones we've ever done. And, they're not going to clear that space. You're going to have to pull down the building. And that's what finally happened. That's ultimately what led to the original Hard Rock building. Again, 3-story structure, shaped like a guitar, being destroyed. Now, mind you, that's gone, but the Hard Rock Cafe, that's not going anywhere as far as Universal Orlando is concerned. The resort actually signed a contract extension with the Hard Rock Corporation back in 2019 that right now, Eric, is going to keep them as part of the resort through 2039.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now,
yeah, it's going to be around.
Yeah. Now, I wish I could say the same about the Universal Hollywood Hard Rock that was built, again, in 96 as part of the original City Walk. That actually closed back in January of 2020. And what's interesting is that got reimagined as the West Coast version of Toothsomes. That opened in January of 2023. And on a future installment of the Epic Universal podcast, we should probably talk about the actual Hard Rock Hotel there. Have you guys stayed there yet? Or
No, that's the one I want to stay at. Mm-hmm. That's the one we haven't really got to go check it out. There hasn't been a lot of resort hopping, mm-hmm. but that is one I'm very curious about. I believe they have music playing underwater in their pools. I think that's a big deal.
They do, and they have some pretty spectacular poolside bars. You should definitely check that out.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one that, and I appreciate all the Hard Rock stuff because I think Hard Rock was the first time I didn't even realize it, but I liked themed entertainment. I liked things that were themed mm-hmm. because I remember going into a Hard Rock, I think in Myrtle Beach was the first one I went to. And then we had one in Pittsburgh for quite some time. And I think it was kind of like an Egyptian type theme, but I absolutely loved it to the point where I went back and I started doing blueprints to make my apartment like a Hard Rock. And I actually had I was getting the albums and I was going to put drum sets and everything all around. Wow. I absolutely love a Hard Rock and everything. So it's nice to know that they're going to be around for a while here in Orlando.
Wow. I had no idea you were that big a fan when I started working on that feature earlier today. Oh, wow.
Now, big rock and roll fan, Jim. I got about 500 vinyls. My dad was a drummer. I got some of the psychedelic red drums that he had. The Ringo Starr had the Ludwig's double bass. So I don't have any musical talent, but boy, I like music. Wow. So this is a nice crossover. So every time that we've gone down there a couple times and I've got 2 or 3 and they have wonderful shirts, mm-hmm. beautiful material. And I have a whole bunch of Hard Rock shirts that I wear religiously everywhere.
That is, I didn't know, seriously, I didn't know this going into the feature today, folks. So learned something myself here today.
Hey, Jim, I do want to tell you though, real quick, mm-hmm. one thing that's really cool about the Hard Rock right now, mm-hmm. and they just recently moved it, Berlin Wall sitting right out front. Yes! And I got to touch the Berlin Wall the last trip.
That has been in place in Florida since the first restaurant opened back in April of 1990. I in fact, thank you for bringing that up. I meant to mention that when I was talking about things like the bricks from the Beatles Club in Frankfurt. Mm-hmm. They're serious when it comes to the memorabilia.
Yeah, and that was the piece of the wall in which Roger Waters from Pink Floyd played in front because there was a hammer and cross. Was graffitied on there, and then there's a famous story mm-hmm. that talks about a janitor accidentally power washing it off one night and thinking that it was graffiti from so lots of history there. So yeah, if you get a chance to go to the Hard Rock Cafe, there was all types of cool stuff. I think there's an Elvis room mm-hmm. in this one. There was some John Lennon stuff. I think there is mm-hmm. maybe a car, mm-hmm. and maybe it was like a Prince something used. But yeah, it's a great place. And next time, you make me want to go back there now. So I'm going to have to book it next time we're down in Orlando.
Very cool. Well, no. Again, no idea you were this big a fan. All right. Well, on that note, folks, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Epic Universal podcast. And by the way, if you have suggestions for future feature stories or topics you'd like Eric and I to discuss, feel free to pass those along through social media. And beyond that, just want to thank you for listening. And on behalf of Mr. Hersey, just want to let you know we will be back again with a brand new episode of this podcast next week.